Hey everybody, welcome. It is our Friday roundup that we haven't done in a couple weeks because we've been away.
We have been.
And so on today's Friday roundup, we want to talk about the unfairness threshold and how important it is to understand in marriage. We want to talk about how this has been the week from
just a lot.
things we can't say and just some personal musings. So yeah, let's do the marriage you want and the unfairness threshold. So
remember that the marriage you want is launching March 11th.
Yes, our new book is out on March 11th that Keith and I wrote. Joanna amazingly did the stats. You came up with most of the good lines, although your name's not on the cover this time. And you know, we have the launch team going, and the launch team closes on Sunday. So if you want to get in the launch team, you have 48 hours more, and you can do it by pre-ordering the book. Doesn't matter where you pre-order, and then just send your receipt to pre-order at marriageyouwantbook.com, and you will get our pre-order bonus, which was our alternate conclusion, and an invite to the launch team, which is pretty fun. Mm-hmm. But in that launch team, you know, I've been asking for feedback. What do people think of different chapters? What's really been resonating with you? What's your overall impression? And I think the word that I've been hearing so much is optimistic, which I love. Like, this is an optimistic book. It's like, yeah, you can have a good marriage. You can have a marriage you actually enjoy. And the other word is safe, which I love. It's like, finally, we have a safe marriage book, a marriage book that isn't going to make you feel guilty for having needs or make you feel like, oh, you just need to pray harder or something. It's like, no, it is valid to want a good relationship, and let us show you how to get there without gimmicks and with just a lot of nuance. So yeah, that's fun. And it's about time that we had a good one. We also have a study guide that goes with it so that you can do it with your small group or premarital curriculum or whatever. But one of the key things, the key stats that we found was something that we call the unfairness threshold. And we talked about that in the podcast this week. But it basically goes like this. It's like in the first couple of years of marriage, you can put up with things being unfair and still be pretty happy. You can be like, oh, look at me just loving my spouse selflessly. Aren't I a great person? This is so great how I have this opportunity to show Jesus to my spouse. And isn't this lovely that I get to do all these things? But when it's really unfair, you can't put up with it forever. And by the 10-year mark, you see people getting really unhappy. And by the 15 and 20-year mark, it gets really bad. And we see this for a lot of things. We see it for sex. Like, she can put up with sex where she never orgasms for a while, but it doesn't work long term. Eventually, those marriages get sexless and really unhappy. If she's always the one to initiate repair, or if he is, it's just that it tends to be one-sided.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if there's one person who always initiates repair, you can put up with that for a little bit, but not forever.
But eventually you just feel like they don't care about you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like if I'm always the one who initiates repair, then it's like you're saying you don't matter enough to me to actually
like, I don't care
this.
if we're good or not, because I know you're going to do it, so whatever. You don't want anyone to feel whatever about your marriage.
I should let you guys all see my mug, too. This is our merch mug, our prayer. Was it prayer in 10 pegs and prophecy and leadership and preaching the gospel to all that will hear? That's biblical womanhood. We see it with housework, where if someone is doing the lion's share of the housework, so more than 75% of the housework, you can say, yeah, my spouse does. She got in from a flight that was canceled in the middle of the night last night. So we will tell you all about that soon. But she can put up with that for a little bit, but she can't put up with it forever. And we just see it again and again and again. And, you know, people always talk about these, and we talked about this on the podcast 2 weeks ago, like last week's podcast. So not the one from yesterday, but from 8 days ago. Like, on how people are always talking about these gray divorces, right? Or like the divorces that happen when the kids leave for university, you know, and kids were the only thing holding them together, and then they just divorce because they've grown distant. But I don't think that's what's happened. I think in a lot of marriages, things have just been really unfair. And it's been
unsustainable for a long time, and they can keep it together for the kids, but once the kids aren't there anymore, it's like, well, why am I keeping this together? This isn't getting better. It's been 24 years. Yeah.
And so I think what I just want to say is, you know, if you're in the first couple of years of marriage and things aren't really fair, do something about it now when it's not bugging you that much.
Can I just say that as someone who raised the biggest stink for the first 3 months of our marriage, picked every fight. I was like, no. We're both really happy that we did that. Like, that's the thing. And because we were both in psychology, my husband and I, like, when we first got married. And so we knew all the stats about the patterns you get into in the first 3 years of your relationship are the patterns that tend to follow you forever unless you actually change them yourself. And changing them takes 10 times minimum the amount of effort as creating habits.
Yeah.
Right? And so we were like, every small little thing, no, let's fight over it. Let's get this through. Let's make this right. And it did help a lot, and we ended up on a really good trajectory.
Yeah.
And I just don't like sweat the small stuff when it could turn into a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it's not just a personality difference, but it's actually like, no, this isn't fair. This isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you used to do this when you lived with roommates, and now you don't do it when we're living together, kind of things.
Yeah, so you can figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really does bear good dividends, because you can have a good marriage. And I think the other thing that we talked about, I forget if it was on this week's podcast or last week's, but like, it seemed like in about half of marriages, people are doing really well.
Yep.
Like, they are totally dividing things up. It's totally fair. And by fair, I don't mean that like they each do 50% of the housework, they each do 50% of everything. Because that's not always how relationships work. Sometimes someone has a way busier work schedule outside the home or whatever.
Sometimes people decide to create like 50 square feet of gardening space in the backyard. And so people create a lot of extra work for the house that would be inappropriate to ask her husband to do when he said, do we need another garden? And I said, we need 20 more feet of garden. And so sometimes people need to take the lion's share of the mental load for people's hobbies, that even if they contribute to the household, because it was people's choice.
Yes.
So it's not always 50-50.
Yeah, but the key thing is, is it when you look at your relationship as a whole, is this okay? And it's okay to ask that question. I think sometimes in the church we don't ask that question because we're supposed to live like Jesus. We're supposed to show grace to one another. We're supposed to not hold grudges. We're supposed to not keep records of wrongs. And all those things are true, but you have to hold everything with nuance. And that's another word that someone said in our launch team, I think Jenny Klitsch said, is that this book is so full of nuance. Mm-hmm. We're not giving you pat answers. It's like, sometimes you should make a big issue out of it, and sometimes you shouldn't. It depends. And here's how you tell which is which.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry, sweet PB. You're gonna have to be the one to figure out. If it's a big issue or if it's not, because no one else can tell you. And if you're waiting for someone else to tell you, you're handing over your own future happiness to someone else. Yeah, and that's not safe.
Yeah. And so, we're just trying to help people think these things through. And it's really fun. Honestly, I am so happy with this book. And my prayer is that this becomes the book that pastors use for premarital counseling, that it just becomes the healthy Christian marriage book. Beth Allison Barr read it and wrote to me yesterday that, she absolutely loves this book. This is the book that everyone needs to read. So this is the best marriage book she's ever read. So
thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Beth. And we'll be doing a webinar with Beth about her new book, Becoming the Preacher's Wife, at the end of March too. So more about that. Now let's explain why Becca is yawning. Okay, so
I'm not doing good, people.
Okay, to put all of this in perspective, we were not on the Delta flight.
No.
We weren't on the Delta flight. And so everything that we have been through this week
is not as bad.
It's not as bad
as what people who went through the Delta flight went through.
We were, however, in Fort Lauderdale after a cruise. We had the Bear Marriage cruise last week, so about 40 of our supporters joined us for a Caribbean cruise, which was really fun. And we got to know each other, and a bunch of people made friends, and it was super fun. But we had to fly back from Fort Lauderdale, and we were flying back on the day of the crash.
And we were flying into Ottawa, so it seems like the plane that was coming to pick us up was on the tarmac waiting to go when the Delta flight crashed and everything shut down, so then it never made it to Fort Lauderdale. And then at the point they had a plane, they were rerouting everyone to Ottawa, so Ottawa was shut down.
It was awful.
It was just a mess.
So they couldn't book us on for another 3 days. But Keith really needed to get home because his dad is sick. You'll hear more about that probably in the next few weeks. And so our airline sold Keith a ticket on a different airline for the next day without telling the other airline they had sold this ticket. So he shows up at the airport and he had no reservation. And then Keith and I finally flew out on Wednesday, but our flight was delayed by 5.5 hours. And then when we got to Ottawa, they haven't loaded any of our luggage on the plane. Nobody's luggage from the entire flight had been loaded on the plane. So we are still waiting for our luggage, and I'm rapidly running out of underwear, but that's no one's problem but my own. Anyway.
We have our luggage, and we have young children, so it was very important for us to get our luggage.
Yeah, so they got home yesterday. They got home
I got them at 1:30 in the morning yesterday. Mm-hmm. And then my kids, despite being up 4 hours past their bedtime, inexplicably woke up right at the normal time.
Yes.
And we're very tired over here.
Yes, and we were traveling with our youngest, who has my youngest daughter, who has a baby who's just a year old. And while staying in Fort Lauderdale for a couple of extra days sounds romantic, it actually isn't that great when
you run out of American cash.
And when you're in a hotel where there really isn't a lot to do and you can't walk anywhere, and you've got 3 car seats every time. You can't all fit in Ubers. So we have to hire 2 Ubers. And
so we did get to know the Fort Lauderdale public transit. So that was fine.
So anyway, that's what we went through. So and then so
first of all, I do want to say a massive shout out to, it was so nice meeting so many of you. There was we got to play board games and hang out, and it was genuinely so nice. And so thank you to everyone who came and who supported us.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was really fun to put faces to names and chat with people who have been really impacted by our work. So that was very encouraging. Yes. The thing that hasn't been so encouraging though, and I do want to say something about this, is it was just hard, honestly. Being in the U.S. the last couple of weeks, because a lot of people think the 51st state thing is a joke. Yeah. Or that Canadians would want to be the 51st state. And that's hard.
Yeah, and you need to know, we talk a lot about why do we believe the things that we believe, and if you're someone who thinks the 51st state thing is a joke, or that America is subsidizing Canada, then you need to know that you're in an echo chamber. No one agrees with you. Yeah. Outside of your own little bubble. You are in an echo chamber, and you are doing what we were warned about in 1984. And I'm not even apologizing for that. Read anyone else's news. Just do it. Don't be afraid of information.
Yeah. Read the stats on fentanyl going into Canada versus fentanyl coming into the U.S. over our border. Read the stats on how much we sell you energy at a discount. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's
literally read anyone else's news. Read from non-American news sources. You shouldn't be afraid of the truth, right? So don't be afraid of the truth. But you have to understand that, it's really, really discouraging to be people who have poured our lives into helping Americans, find freedom and trying to help the American church, and then having there be jokes about our country just disappearing, and culture being erased.
Yeah, and when you make jokes about annexing another country, it normalizes it. Yeah. It normalizes it, and then it gets easier to have war. And, we have family members in the military. People on our team have family members in the military, and we're really proud of being Canada. Our national anthem, God, keep our land glorious and free.
And it's just hard that right now it's America that's making the threats against it being free.
Yeah. So I know that the vast majority of you stand with us. I know that, but I just want you to understand how much Canadians are hurting right now. This is really, really hard. And so please tell everyone that it's not a joke to talk about Canada's 51st state. Canadians overwhelmingly do not want that. And we're not even sure what this means for us going forward. We really feel called to be almost missionaries to the American church. That's what we've done, is we've been trying to help you all see that. I've been to every state. I've been to all 50 states. I've never ever felt uncomfortable traveling in the US before until this week. It was just hard. So that's been hard to personally deal with, and I just wanted you all to know. We're going to keep at it, because we know that so many Americans support us. We know that the church needs messages of healing and freedom and optimism about marriage, but it comes at a cost. So we just wanted to let you know. Yeah. All right. Please pre-order the marriage you want.
And vive le Canada.
Vive le Canada. We'll see you next week.
I'm going to go take a nap.